Hello, everyone. Welcome to week number 2 in Science 200. We are really starting to delve now into the scientific process. And this week will be heavy on the textbook work, and I'll get into that in just a second. Before I move off of the slide, I just want to mention that this is a picture that I took from a moving boat. We were going puffin watching in Scotland, and this sea eagle was hunting for puffins to eat. In fact, we saw it catch one and then drop it, and the little puffin bounced down these rocks like you see right here and got up and waddled off, which was hilarious. But the boat captain, Angus, told us that this was very unusual to see a sea eagle this close, because they are usually flying way up in the sky and they don't get near humans, but this one was evidently very hungry. So let's see what we've got going on. Last week, I always do a quick review of what we did last week. So we looked at what are the natural sciences. Biology, I always put that one first. Biology, chemistry, physics, geology, astronomy, and environmental science. What are they? How does science work? We learned the very basics about how science works, and I discussed it in my video for last week. And we learned about the importance of revision and the peer review process, and we're going to see more of that as we move through this term. We looked at Alexander Fleming and penicillin, one of the greatest examples of all times in my book of how science works. You have to have a prepared mind. You have to understand what you see and then act on that when you find something good and unusual. Alexander Fleming did that and brought us a whole group of medicines called antibiotics that I can bet each and every one of you has taken at one point in your life. You chose your research topic, so I can't wait to get into those on Monday, which will be tomorrow for me, and take a look at what you have chosen as your research topic. All right, this week is all about Chapter 2. So, Chapter 2 was not written by a scientist. Definitely not me, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of reading for this week, but it gives you a sense of how science actually operates and the importance of data collection. I cannot stress that enough to anyone who is studying science. So this week is all about Chapter 2. Remember that there's one chapter per week in this term, so we've got 8 total chapters, 8 total weeks. This is week 2. You're working on Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is all about cholera and a cholera outbreak and multiple outbreaks in the city of London, England, in the 1800s. Sanitation was not good back then. People were drawing water, their drinking water, from the River Thames, and they were dumping their sewage water into the River Thames. And guess what? If you dumped your sewage water above the point where you're drawing off your drinking water, you're basically drinking sewage. And that's what people were doing, and they didn't realize it then. They didn't know where the well water came from that they were consuming, and they didn't know where their sewage went either. So sanitation was really big. So this is a total move from an agricultural type of society to an industrial one, and people came to live together in the city of London because that's where the jobs were. But housing was not adequate, sanitation was abysmal, and this created a lot of problems in public health, including things like the cholera outbreaks. So cholera it produces a type of diarrhea. It's called rice water stool. So stool is basically fecal matter, and rice water refers to this cloudy white discharge that you would have, and that's because you not only had eliminated all the food that's in your system, but now water was pouring out of your digestive tract to the point where you could become completely dehydrated, and you could die from it, especially small children, older people, but even healthy adults could too, because this was just such a devastating type of diarrhea. So that was the disease cholera. Well, people back then thought that all diseases were transmitted through miasma. Miasma is basically, if you want to think of it this way, smelly air. So if you smelled bad air, if you smell sticky in the air, then that was some disease that was wafting about in the air that you could catch and get sick from. And they thought that's how all diseases were spread. Now, of course, we know that is not true, but we also recognize that aerosol droplets are a wonderful way for diseases to spread. You know that through all the respiratory tract infections that we're having right now, uptick in COVID cases. You know that that's how COVID is spread. But there are lots of other ways of transmission, sexually transmitted infections, through water and food, through fomites. Fomites are inanimate objects, through animals, mosquito bites, etc. So we've learned a lot since the 1800s. And one thing that we had to learn was that water can become contaminated and cause waterborne diseases. So we had to figure that out. Through this process of figuring this out, we can see how science works. One of the important people in our story is Dr. John Snow, and he was very interested in this cholera outbreak and all the water that was moving between people, the sewage water and also the drinking water. And the way that he determined that cholera was a waterborne disease was by mapping out every case of cholera and mapping out where water sources came from. And so I mentioned just a minute ago that data collection is terribly important, and the use of data in showing your point in science is tremendously important. And that's what John Snow did. And he basically refuted this idea that miasma was causing all of the cholera cases. Also, you're going to develop a research question. You picked out a topic, but now you need to ask a question that you're going to examine. The articles that you read in chapter 1 having to do with your topic actually probably gave you really good questions, but just think about it. If your topic is electric vehicles, just sit back from that topic and think for a minute. What questions do people have about EVs? Are they as environmentally friendly as everybody says they are? Are there any environmental costs to producing this type of vehicle? Where does the energy come from that runs EVs? Well, that totally depends on where you live, doesn't it? Are there benefits to using an EV? Everybody says that there are benefits, but are there truly benefits? On the other hand, your topic might be ocean acidification. Well, how does it happen? What is it affecting? Does it affect all marine life? Does it affect specific parts of the marine ecosystem? You know, the ocean is so big. Is this really a problem? So just sit back from your topic and think about questions that anybody would have about your particular topic. This is going to be your research question. Sources for research, because you need to start getting into the research at this point in the game. The Shapiro Library. We have a wonderful source of information for research, and that is the Shapiro Library. Our library is so extensive that you can find sources about anything, and a lot of these sources are full text sources. Now that's a benefit, and I'll explain that in just a second. There are other databases. Google Scholar is perfectly good. Do not just do a Google search. Oh my word. If you type in GMO into a Google search, you are going to come up with millions of hits. Do you really want to look through that many? Are you going to just look through the first few pages and it can all be nonsense? Yeah, so I would not do that. You need to do a Google Scholar search. Also, another database that you can use is PubMed. So if you go to Google Scholar or PubMed and you find a good article about your topic, but you can't read the whole text because you would have to pay for it, look up that particular source in the Shapiro Library. I can bet you can get access to it. So that's the advantage to using the Shapiro Library. Or you can just use the Shapiro Library because it's very good too. I find that it doesn't narrow down as good as I would want it to sometimes because it is so huge. It's such a huge database. So a lot of the time I use a combination of these. And yes, I have used them because they are wonderful resources for us. So don't skip over the Shapiro Library. These are dolphins strand feeding off the coast of South Carolina. They work together cooperatively to gather up fish in schools, run them up toward the shore, and then they grab them up in the air and eat them and flip back out into the ocean. They are not actually stranded on the land here. They flip back into the ocean and swim off. So that's a pretty cool phenomenon to see if you ever come to the beaches of South Carolina. All right, my tip of the week this week. Oh, I forgot to mention, we have no discussion board postings this week. If I don't mention them, we don't have them. But also look through your instructions, look in your learning module, and you will see that there's no discussion board postings due this week. The tip of the week, especially with the readings this week, break up your assignments into manageable pieces. So if it were me and I had 15 extra minutes of work, I had break time, I would sit down and read one of the sections in chapter 2 and answer my questions. And then maybe when I get home and I'm fixing supper and I got another 15 minutes, I'd sit down and read another section in chapter 2 and answer the questions while I'm right there. Break up your assignments into manageable pieces. Don't try to sit down on Sunday evening and do everything that you need to do. I know that a lot of people do this. I know. I have done it before. I tried not to do that very much because you never know what's going to happen. But try to figure out different times in the week when you can just break off a piece of these assignments, do them, and then pick back up later. Here's my name again, Dr. Janie Sigmon. There's my email address, m.sigmon@snhu.edu. If you need anything, if you're having any issues, please let me know. These are the puffins that sea eagle was hunting. Aren't they so doggone cute? Yes, they are absolutely that cute in person too. But of course, they're awesome too. And I saw thousands and thousands of them that day in Scotland. So anyway, I hope that you have a good week, this week number 2. If you need anything, please, 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 just let me know. Shoot me an email and I will be glad to answer your questions or help you with your concerns. Have a great week.